do. And there were 2 or 3 places that I went. I now understand with more detail who this man was. Many of you know that the Roman Empire began 100 years before Christ, and it expanded for the next 500 years with several emperors that followed, and expanded beyond Western Europe and went into Britain. And it wasn't until around 400 AD that the Roman Empire fell, and the Roman forces withdrew from Britain. In this period between 400 AD and 1000 AD, the Normans came in 1066 and began the Middle Ages, but in this period of 400 AD to about 1000 AD, it was known as the Dark Ages. And this was the time of Arthur and Uther and Merlin. In these Dark Ages, between 400 AD, when the Romans had pulled out, chaos ensued all throughout Britain. There was no government, there was no ruling. There were only warring factions and tribes and leaders among tribes who people called kings. And there were several hundred kings in Britain. They were all kings of their own tribes, fighting with each other over resources and land. And so it was called the Dark Ages. Because there was no government in England protecting her as the Romans pulled out, the Anglo-Saxons came in and invaded. And there were wars amongst themselves, as well as trying to fight themselves off from the Anglo-Saxon invasion. It was during this time there was a king around the Welsh area. Wales is in the northwest part of the island of Great Britain. And in this area near Wells, there was a king called Vortigern. And he was one of the few kings that was beginning to unite the tribes and fight off the Anglo-Saxons. And he was trying to build a protective tower. And as he did this, the tower kept falling. His priests told him that he had to sacrifice a fatherless boy in order to have this tower stand. And so a young man who was in his early teens, called Aurelius Amarius, sometimes Merlin is known by his last name as Emrys, coming from Aurelius Amarius. And he was the daughter of a princess who was a priestess who had been taken by a man of dark magic and seer. And he had taken this woman and she begat Merlin. And so he was fatherless as he was unclaimed by his own family. But he took the name of Aurelius Amarius from his family name. And so when the priest told Vortigern that they had to sacrifice a fatherless boy in order to get this tower of protection to come up, he chose Merlin. Merlin being of high birth and intelligence and having a wizard for a father, outwitted the king and said, the reason your tower isn't going up is there are 2 dragons beneath your tower that are fighting. The red dragon of Britain and the white dragon of the Anglo-Saxons. And instead of sacrificing me, go and look and see these pools underneath the tower. And so Vortigern saw this, and instead of sacrificing Merlin, decided to make him a valued member of the court, as he had the ability to be a seer, S-E-E-R, a seer, someone who sees in the future. And so this young boy, and Merlin came from the Welsh name of Eagle, as he had eagles around him and he loved birds of prey. He came to be known as Merlin. So Merlin, Eagle of Amarius, this young man who had inherited his father's abilities of being a seer, came to be a court-valued consultant. Vortigern was killed in battle, and Uther became the next king who was uniting all of the factions. And this took years and years of conquering a tribe and going in and then convincing the king of that tribe, rather than to die, to unite. And so one by one, Vortigern and then Uther became uniting all of the tribes so they could fight off the Saxons and survive. One of the generals that fought under Uther, Gorias, had a beautiful wife, Igraine. The legend tells us that Merlin released the breath of the dragon and allowed Uther to come to Igraine looking like her husband Gorias so that he could have her. When I was meditating and I asked Merlin to give me an account of these facts, he said no. He said, I didn't release the breath of the dragon. Uther just took her when Gorias was in the field. And as she became pregnant with Arthur, she discarded the child, knowing that it was not of her husband. And so Uther took Arthur, and Merlin was a part of Arthur's life trying to raise him. Merlin had a very cynical view of these kings. He said they were egregiously selfish, filled with warrior-like attitudes. And although they had the heart space energy of uniting a kingdom so that the people of Britain could survive, they were egoic and took what they wanted, and they were not men of heart. And so Merlin made it his decision to be a consult where he could help Arthur become a man of heart. And when Arthur did take the throne from Uther, Merlin tried desperately to have him open his heart and not be the kind of warring father that Uther was. He took his wife Guinevere, also in the same way that Uther took Igraine, more or less against her will. And this is why she had the affair with Lancelot, and he was later on having to have her burned at the stake for her affair. Merlin tells me Arthur is not the fanciful, romantic man his myth has been allowed him to receive. He was a good warrior, and he did unite many more tribes and continue the work of Uther and Vortigern. But when he died father, he died without child, without wife, and the area of Britain became replete again with chaos, and it stayed that way for several hundred years, another 500 years, until the invasion of the Normans in 1066. So Vortigern, Uther, and Arthur only gave Britain 50 years of peace, and then ensued another 500 years of the Dark Ages. Merlin was a seer. He saw the future. He was a wise man. He communicated with animals. He was an herbologist, an alchemist. He was a gentle soul who only wished to serve that area where he lived. He found these kings to be selfish and egoic, and he adopted a fairly cynical view of them. He did live to be 150 years old, and after Arthur died, he went back into the forest. His message here, he says, to be wary of when the ego takes over your thoughts. He reminds me to say, as I mentioned, about inventorying your thoughts. He says, go inside and look. Understand when it is your heart speaking as compared to the fury of your mind. When the mind is in fear, it takes up arms in battle and believes the battle, the warrior, to be attacking some outside source. And so it is the inner manifestation of battle and fear that is shown to be on the outside, when the true battle is always on the inside. He says, make peace with yourself. Here, when you are battling inside and raising arms against your own higher self within your lower self, this is when unconsciousness happens. We are so busy battling inside, arguing with ourselves, saying one thing, deciding another, going back and forth. We have more than 1,000 conversations a day with our own self. This is where the peace comes in. When we choose not to condemn and battle our own self, do we so naturally alleviate the need and the desire to battle with anybody else? Isn't it interesting that Merlin would give the same message as Mahatma Gandhi, as Lao Tse, all of these amazing philosophers who have lived thousands of years apart, all come down to one message: peace within here, peace in the heart. Living without battle, living without rage, living without judgment, loving yourself in here allows us to manifest that outside of our own heart space. It must begin in here. The elusive, desperate idea that we can look for peace and see it outside. And when we say things like, when I stop arguing with my children, I'll be happy. When my boss stops getting on my back, I'll be happy. When we have a new president that cares about the people, I'll be happy. When we have non-corrupt corporations running the world, I'll be happy. This idea of seeing it out here before it happens in here is the great mystery and the great lie. It has to come from in here. It's a big leap of faith, and it's a big area of self-trust to know that when we have it in here, and then we go out and we share with our friends and family and everybody that we interact with to also create it in here. You see, because the people that create that chaos in here, they are the ones that are creating it outside, but we have to agree with them in order for it to happen. Everything is a co-creation. There is no them and us. There is only us. Everything that we see is a reality in front of us is because on some level, on some place in our cellular memory, co-creating with our higher self, we have decided that that's possible. If you decide someone can hurt you, someone can say something unkind, someone can disappoint you or disrespect you, it's only a matter of time before someone comes along and does exactly that. I love the story, and it seems so unrelated, but yet I was reminded of this again this morning. We've all seen the story and read perhaps the book of Gone with the Wind and Scarlett O'Hara. And this courageous, scrapping, stubborn, courage of her convictions young woman that's willing to marry husbands that she doesn't love, use prisoners to run her mills, as she stands on terror and says, by God, nobody, me or my family will ever starve again. And everybody around her only saw that she was willing to lie and to scrap and do what she had to. And all of her friends and family were so critical of her. And there was only one person that saw who she truly was, and that was her cousin Melanie. And always said Scarlett did what she had to do. And Melanie saw the courage in Scarlett. She saw the courage of her convictions. She saw that she protected her family at all odds, even if it meant being ostracized by the people that she was willing to protect. And so everything about your life is a matter of perspective. When someone is in front of you, do you see friend or foe? Do you see someone criticizing you, or do you see someone criticizing themselves? Do you see someone being unkind to you, or someone being unkind to themselves? The only reason you would interpret what they say and do as unkindness to yourself is that there is some part of you inside that is being unkind to you, and so there is an agreement of energy. If you are not unkind to yourself and you see someone acting this way, your first thought would be, oh, how unhappy they are. The moment that you make it about you and say, they spoke to me badly, they frustrated me, that's because there's something in here, the view that is manifesting that agreement. learn how to manifest wonderful things to create, rather than things that make you feel bad. You have all the power and all the responsibility, all the power and all the responsibility to create everything in here that you need to be happy. And so Merlin says, you are all alchemists, you are all seers, you are all creators of your own reality. This I tried to tell those that would be the leaders of my time, but they chose not to see the wisdom within themselves and depend on me to see their visions. As I gave them these visions, I tried with all my heart to allow them to see this within themselves, but they would not see their own greatness. They only saw their fears, and so they became warriors of battle. My heart was broken. I lived out my time alone and away from man, seeing people now in this earth realm practice the same thing for thousands of years. As I hold in my heart space energy the desire for man to look inside themselves and see the goodness within, and to see the light. To practice this light above practicing all other things. To be a seeker of the light within is the greatest journey someone can take. It is the one with the most rewards and the most joy and peace. It is the only thing that man has yet to do to accomplish the greatness and the highest potential of all of their abilities. Take that journey within and see the light inside. See the goodness in everything that you do, and the ability to exact peace in everywhere you go. I like those words. Be a seeker of the light within. That sounds like the best place to go. We are raised in families and friends and society by the people that have been for thousands of years in this idea of fear. That the only way that we're safe is if we point a finger outside and say, that's the person that's wrong, that's the idea that's wrong, these are the people that are wrong. And this battle that we create within ourselves gets projected out there. Being at peace with yourself is something we have to learn from scratch. We haven't been taught this by our parents or ancestors going back hundreds of generations. So few philosophers have understood this and tried to speak of this. All of the great minds of our time. And this is the new way. As you begin this journey now, you are on the forefront of those that will begin to take this journey and share it with others. You are therefore all ministers of peace. As you create that peace in here, you become a minister of peace to everybody outside. Whether you do it with a label or a job or a profession, it doesn't matter. Being that minister of peace within yourself creates it on the outside. I know it can be tough when there's so much out there around that gives what we appear to think of evidence that it cannot exist. And that's where your own personal leap of faith has to come in. It can exist. It does exist. It is within you. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. You're not going to wake up tomorrow and have every single issue in your life resolved and be at peace with them. But every day you can take that journey and create one more resolution, one more reconciliation, And every day, as you take this journey inside, you can feel a little bit more at peace every day. And it doesn't really matter how long the journey is. You can look behind in your rearview mirror and see where you've come from and choose to celebrate the successes of what you've done or lament over the things that you think you haven't done yet. You can look forward with disdain and think the journey's too long, it's too big, it's not worth it. Or you can look forward and say, every day tomorrow is going to be better and better. And every day I'll feel better and better and younger and younger. That's your perspective. That's your choice. Let's do some toning. If you would like to invite Merlin's energy, his wisdom, into your heart, and I warn you, he's a tiny bit cynical, but just hear his words. Or you can invite the master that is on the card in front of you. Does everybody have a card? They're up here on the chair right here. If you don't have a card, come and grab one. Invite him.
Just a reminder to lower the mic.
Oh, thank you. Sure. Okay. Breathing. Setting your intention. Deciding that you have the power, the responsibility, the ability, the desire, the intent to be your own personal alchemist of your life, past, present, and future. Deciding to imagine what it would be like every day to know that you can have a part of you revealed with light that can be reconciled, released, readjusted, realigned, reviewed, and put into a new perspective. Having complete and total self-forgiveness and self-love. Knowing you have this ability and this desire to journey inside. See yourself from the highest truth. If you have invited Merlin's energy in, allow him now, with his wisdom and his staff, to show you how to do this. Or any other ascended master or guardian angel, if you have chosen someone other than Merlin, it matters not. Asking to be shown how to be your own personal alchemist of your life, your energy, your path, your knowledge, your wisdom, your ancestry. Taking hold of and advantage of all the knowledge of all the Akashic records of your personal experience and existence. Ask to be given the tools to be a seeker of light within your own heart space energy. Knowing what that looked like, what that feels like. Knowing it's possible. Knowing it's safe. To know what it feels like to be personally empowered in limitless capacity, while at the same time to be in complete and total unconditional love of self, and the juxtaposition of love and personal empowerment, and how that combination allows us to be the most beautiful, expressive, divine being of light. That is our right and our responsibility. ability to change any aspect of your life at all. There are no limits or rules on what you can change. You have the power to change the internal dialogue and therefore the corresponding emotions. And the dialogue and the emotions create the thoughts that manifest the reality. You have the ability to see things completely differently, to feel things differently, to know the truth of the universe, to hear the song in your own heart, to be a divine being of light. You have the ability to find that within you that you are, and know that that is the only truth of your existence. We thank Merlin for being with us today and lending his energy and wisdom. Taking as long as you want to come back to the room. He was showing me that when he was here, he had a very sad energy when he walked the earth. Completely reconciled now, being in a higher consciousness. But it broke his heart when he was working with these three kings that weren't able to see the greatness of who they were, but lived in fear. He did not have the romanticized version of Arthur as we've seen in Tale. Would anybody like to have their cards read? Girl?
White Chariot, purification.
She's congratulating you on all of the work that you've done in your body this year. And she's saying that you may not realize it because it's been happening so gradually, but that you've pulled all kinds of toxins out of your system, that your joints are more malleable, your blood is flowing easier, you're more hydrated, your organs are functioning better, and she says that you've probably added at least 15 to 20 years